Michael Morbius.
Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel.
Oh my gosh.
Today I wanted to talk about the movie Morbius. I didn't have the chance to watch this movie last week, but after seeing how split the reviews were for it, I knew I had to go watch it myself this week. This movie is directed by Daniel Espinosa, and the only two movies I recognize from him are Safe House and Life. Everything else looks pretty B-rated. The synopsis is as follows. Dangerously ill with a rare blood disorder and determined to save others from the same fate, Doctor Morbius attempts a desperate gamble. While at first it seems to be a radical success, a darkness inside of him is soon unleashed. Going into this film, I must admit I was anticipating a bad performance from Jared Leto. He's not my favorite actor, but the attraction to Sony's anti-heroes outweighed my unattraction to Jared Leto's acting. So without further ado, let's get into the 6 things that make a movie great. 1. The plot. At first it seemed like the bare bones of a good plot were there. You have Michael Morbius trying to find a cure for the disease that he has along with many others, and he's coming to the end of his rope. In his own words, his window is closing, and he expects that both he and his best friend Milo are going to die soon. So he turns to unethical means to try to find a cure for this, and ends up coming with an antidote that turns him into this vampire hybrid creature. As this movie progresses, you begin to realize that there's nothing there. I don't know how else to describe it, except that this movie felt like a really long trailer for itself. It really feels like at least 40 minutes of this movie is missing. Like someone went into all of the important parts, chopped out a bunch of the details, and said, yeah, this movie's under 2 hours, so we're good to go. This movie lacks any real substance. The plot points, I saw similarities between the Eric Bana Incredible Hulk, Amazing Spider-Man 2, and Dracula Untold. It really feels like they stole those plot points from those movies. There were also a couple moments in this movie involved with bats. They played the exact same build-up from Christopher Nolan's Batman, or something dreadfully similar to it. So in addition for this movie feeling like a giant commercial for itself, it also feels like it just ripped off at least 4 other films that I can think of off the top of my head. And the real lack of detail and substance really takes away any circumstantial changes they could have made, because I know there's nothing new under the sun, and at some point you're going to come across plot points that are similar, but it really feels like these are the exact same plot points. There's a lot of story missing here, so plot gets a huge thumbs down. 2 is family friendliness. While this movie is rated PG-13, there's something about vampire genre that can come across scarier and darker than other PG-13 movies might. There's barely any profanity. There's also no sexuality and no nudity, which is refreshing, but there's a good amount of violence, blood, action, and disturbing visuals that may not be suited for a younger audience. The theme of the film is a bit too dark for me to give family friendliness a thumbs up, so I have to give it a thumbs down. 3 is acting and script. Like I said, I feared Jared Leto's performance a bit, but honestly, I didn't mind him as Morbius. He does a pretty decent job, but I have to say, because of the lack of story, this whole movie felt like a bunch of characters just reading lines, because there's so much of the story missing. I mean, you have actors like Matt Smith, Jared Harris, Tyrese Gibson, and they're wasted in this film because they're barely given any screen time, and what screen time they are given, there's no story for them to stand on. And their acting performances don't save the film for a lack of story. And the same goes for the script. Some of the lines don't even land right or the way they would if there was an actual story here. There's nothing for them to stand on. There's nothing for them to build on, nothing for them to draw emotion from, and you can really tell it in this film. So acting and script overall get a thumbs down. 4 is character development. Just like the lack of story development in this movie, there's a huge lack of character development. And that's not just true for the side characters, that's true also for the character of Morbius. Especially in his case, there's story points that you could very easily draw on to build emotion and character development for him, but there's nothing here. With all of the stuff they cut out from this movie, there's no character development whatsoever. You feel nothing for him, you feel nothing for the other characters. They try to force a love relationship between Morbius and Dr. Bancroft, but there's nothing there. The reoccurring theme in this movie is that there's so much lack of substance that all areas of this film are drastically affected. So character development gets a thumbs down. 5 is visuals and CGI. Now here there's actually something to talk about. Some of the visuals in this film were dope. The way that you see Morbius use his abilities and learn about them is cool, and the way they play out on screen is actually kind of awesome. If there was anything that this movie focused on, it was strictly the visuals. But that being said, there was some good CGI and there was some bad CGI. Some of it really stood out, while others seemed to blend pretty well with what was on screen. The only thing that bothered me in this area of the film was the fact that near the beginning there was multiple sequences where dirt would fly up on the screen or blood would fly up on the screen. That is technically a fourth wall break, and it pulls me out of any film that I'm watching. It's one of my least favorite tactics that they use in action films. So while this is the best section of the movie, I still have to give it 50-50. And 6 is rewatchability. I have to say that Morbius is one of the worst character introductions in the Marvel Universe. And that says a lot because the bar is set pretty low. Yeah! And I get that this movie was made by Sony, not by Marvel, but they had the opportunity to really build structure for a character that's not as well known and help build the universe of anti-heroes. But for some reason, they just took out all of the critical storytelling in this film. While the character of Morbius is kind of cool and I wouldn't mind seeing him in future films, this movie is garbage, so I would not ever go back and rewatch it. With all of the sections considered, I have to give Morbius a 4.5 out of 10. This movie had some great visuals, it had a decent cast, and it had what seemed like the bare bones of a good story that they could have built upon. Instead, we got an empty shell of a movie with no character development, stolen plot points that were even poorly executed in their own right in this film, and a couple end credit sequences that were better than the actual movie. This movie really seems like it was sloppily made and sloppily put together, which is really surprising because advertisement for this film I thought came out like a year and a half or 2 years ago. So with that being said, I would not waste your time or money going to see Morbius in theaters. Thank you so much for watching. If you've seen Morbius, please let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. As always, I appreciate your love and support, and I'll catch you guys and gals in the next one. There's one spoiler-related thing that I wanted to talk about because it really showed the lack of consistency in the making of this film. The only reason why I caught it, because it happened in a split second, is because I was looking for it. There comes a point in the movie where an innocent doctor is murdered by some vampire creature. To the audience's knowledge, the only one is Morbius. Of course, what I was already thinking was that his best friend, who he told he wouldn't give the antidote to, just like Amazing Spider-Man 2, I thought he might steal it. But after the doctor is killed, we have a shot of Doctor Morbius in the lab, and the 2 remaining vials of his vampire antidote are still on the table. That means that they weren't used when the doctor was killed, which means that Milo didn't have one. So whoever was looking at the consistency of this film did a really poor job. I wonder if anyone else caught that too.